Did you know when we started all this that you'd be in front of a crowd like this today?
Absolutely not. Do you remember how introverted I was?
Yeah.
When we first started shooting Cosmic, I would have to look at you, because as soon as I'd look at the camera, it was like a black hole. It was sucking me in, and I'd just...
It's true.
Yeah, it was bad.
You and I were just talking earlier today about the original film that I shot of you that was like your pilot episode. And I still have that. Nobody's ever seen it. We just have to clean up the audio, but I've already done like 80% of the work. So we probably are going to release our original interview before anybody knew who he was. And
it was shot in your living room.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But we actually had some nice lighting, and it actually looks pretty good. So what was it like in those early days, Corey, when you had been telling me all the stuff that already happened to you in the past, and we'd been talking for, 3 or 4 months. And then all of a sudden, I mean, you were basically out of the game, right? Let's just talk about that for a minute. Explain to people, when you and I first started talking for the first 3 months, what were the most recent things that had happened to you that were Secret Space Program related?
I was pulled back in the 90s, for some groups wanted me to participate in providing them information, but at that time I was no longer a viable asset. I wasn't getting the shots that they gave us.
Well, and one of the things I thought was really interesting that relates to what I was just talking about is you had said that there were ways in which you had been trained to actually detect these portals psychically. So could you describe a little more about what this work was? What were they trying to get you to do?
Yes, they would use intuitive empaths. They would use 3 of them to triangulate portals that would open, the natural portal system. And I've described many times about how the Earth and our local star are connected by an electromagnetic filament. Mm-hmm. And as the Earth spins, that electromagnetic filament is going up and down the equator and going below.
I'm just going to frickin' do it myself.
Going below the surface of the Earth.
I got it. Yeah.
But these points are connecting to nodes, and these nodes can be a magnetic connection that it makes high up in the atmosphere, even in space. It can be on the surface of the Earth, or it can be underneath, even under the ocean. And they would have 3 of us triangulate where these were going to open next, so they could position themselves to take advantage of the portals to travel.
So some of the technology that they had, first of all, these would be like anti-gravity craft they're flying in, I assume, right?
Yes.
But they apparently, when a portal opened up, they might not be able to normally detect it with any electromagnetic signature, but psychics could.
Yes, and they had technological ways of predicting where these would open, but a lot of these, like in the 90s, these groups that came and picked me up, they were picking me up in triangular craft that had been handed down to them. They were cabal-type people that had access to this technology.
Right.
But they didn't have access to all of the technology that was telling them when portals would open. They were flying illegally without clearance, so they couldn't they couldn't call in a location for a portal to open. They had to find another way.
So somehow these guys were doing unauthorized trips, and if they could find one of these naturally occurring portals, they had technology that could then harness it and use it to travel somewhere else.
Correct.
Did you ever have an idea of what they were going to do when they got to the other side? Or what was the reason why they needed to have an unauthorized trip?
You sometimes would be able to extrapolate what was going on by what equipment was around, how people were dressed that were about to go through a portal, but you didn't have a need to know that type of information.
So you didn't stay on the ship once they found the portal. You just found them the portal and they go off on their own.
Right, and a lot of times these people wouldn't even use a ship. They would bring us to a place and we would determine where a portal was going to open, and then they would send a local team through on foot sometimes. They would arrive, like we would give them a longitude, a latitude, and altitude. The team would arrive with a remote set of equipment that would open up a portal. and that these would be on tripods set up around, usually 4, I believe, and in the middle is where of the 4 tripods. Is this making sense? Are you picturing it?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I heard from other insiders. The only difference is that they apparently got it working on 3 instead of 4. But everything else
I
is
can't
the
remember
same.
if it seemed to be that they had to have 4 for 3 spatial connections and then a 4th one for a time.
Even
or
now,
something.
I'm learning brand new stuff, guys. We've never had this conversation before, believe it or not. Give them a big round of applause.
So we would give them this information, and they would have teams that were in craft that would fly to this location, and sometimes they would enter these portals on foot. Sometimes they would drive in with regular vehicles, and like I said, sometimes they would fly. Depending on if the portal's up in the upper atmosphere, they would fly through, and they've even taken submarines through them.
And how do you feel about what the other insiders had said, that you see where you're going and there's like a shimmery heat signature around the edge?
That's exactly how I described it in the past.
So obviously, guys, the trouble that we're having here is that this kind of information seems like it's sci-fi, seems like it belongs in a movie. And somebody who's just casually watching this online and is like, these guys are crazy, Corey Good is crazy. You have to understand the density of different people that have said the same thing, the density of the data, and how consistent this is. We just found another one right now. Anytime I start talking to him about something new and I open up a new line, I invariably hear him say things that other people already told me that I didn't put online. So this is just another example. So that was the last time that you had had anything happen. Now, another thing I remember in the early days when I was talking to you, and if we ever do go through the trouble of digging up all those original recordings and publishing them, there was a certain extraterrestrial contact that you had, and you were very, very evasive. Like, you told me basically everything I wanted to know, except that you said some kind of ET group had contacted you, and it was a very personal thing, and you didn't want to let me know.
Come on, dude. What would you do if 8-foot-tall bluebird started talking to you? You know, you have to sit back and process a little while and wonder if you're crazy.
I mean, I'm absolutely shameless. I'll make jokes about my member, so I probably would just tell everybody. But you and I have very different personalities, so I totally get it.
I'm an introvert.
Yes, I'm definitely not. You're getting it all here. This is the backstage pass, okay? There's the cold cuts. Unlike Faster Pussycat, there's no big jug back there. And there's nobody vomiting over in the singing bowl. So why did you not want to talk to me about these beings? I mean, apart from obviously the embarrassment factor, you had told me there was some other things that were going on, that it was not just like a random set of messages, it was very personal.
Right. Well, during the time, I was told not to share the information. But as I've told you in the past, I had been involved in an intruder intercept and interrogation program. I'd seen many different ETs at their best and at their worst, but I'd never seen an 8-foot-tall bluebird being, ever. I haven't heard anyone talk about it. So I was a bit concerned, to be honest, when it first happened, and I was really trying to figure out what was going on, because it was, it was pretty much almost like a religious experience. These 6th-density beings, you know, your 3rd-density consciousness comes into proximity of theirs, and it affects you.
So walk us through, in these original experiences, how did this happen? Were you told to go out into a field and there's this brilliant light and a craft comes down? What was it like? How did they reach you?
Through my dreams in the beginning. And I remember the first time I was having a dream, and for some reason there was a commercial that was popular during the time, or that it came out during the time. It had a female soldier coming home from deployment, and this huge, I don't even know what kind of dog it was, greeting her, and jumping around all over her and greeting her. And I don't know why I was seeing that, and then all of a sudden the dog kind of morphed and turned around and was this blue bird being right in front of me, and it raised its hand up.
This is not a television commercial now. This is your dream.
No, this is I was dreaming about, for some reason, this television commercial. I don't normally dream about commercials. So this commercial, played out, and the giant dog turned around and morphed into Tier-Air. And Tier-Air just sat there kind of moving his mouth like this and doing his hand, and I'm not hearing anything, but I feel it's communicating with me. And that was it. I woke up and I was like, whoa. That was really, I knew it wasn't a dream, but I didn't know if someone was, screwing around with my head. I'd been involved with technologies, in the past, like Voice of God and others, so I knew what was out there. Right. So it was, then over consecutive nights, it started visiting me again, and I started being able to understand the information that was coming through. It was allowing me, my ego, to see it, but it was communicating with my higher self in the beginning.
And it is very interesting. This is another thing that we've never talked about before. After a while, you got to try to find, how can we do something new? Because you guys have seen everything, right? I mean, like...
Should we have Emery come on out?
Very soon, very soon, yes.
Back in the back.
Yeah. I'm the MC, bro.
Oh, okay. Well.
I want to get to this first. I have an agenda. It's all good. So I wanted to kind of set the record straight on this because I had started reading this book, The Law of One. It's actually a series of 5 books in 1996. And then that paved the way for this contact that I had with what Joe Mason called the dream voice, where I have these stacks of tapes on my desk. They're predicting the future very, very accurately. And it all seemed like I was in touch with the source from the Law of One material, which identifies itself as Ra. And when they were asked about the relationship between Ra and a bird, they said, yes, the bird is the best way to envision what we look like. This is in the Law of One material. The Law of One material also says that anytime they're going to contact someone, they begin in dreams to reduce fear. And so you just, again, validated another aspect of this. So we do all this talking for X number of months, and then you had had these contact experiences you didn't want to tell me about, and you had also said that there was a lot of really personal information in this, stuff that was very deep. And I'm not going to ask you to give that stuff because I know personal by definition means not to be shared in front of 500 of your best friends here and 2 million more on YouTube, right? Once it's stolen. So the point is, we both kind of began in a very similar way. A telepathic contact, a dream contact, and I already had this whole body of Law of One information. I had all the science of it that I've put it together in, like what Teresa was saying in my introduction, source field investigations. That whole book, over 1,000 academic references, is just validating what's in the Law of One, really. And I say that in the acknowledgments at the end. But I didn't even need to mention the Law of One all the way through because their model of science is so much more advanced than ours that if you just take the clues they give you and put it together, you have an entirely new view of science and reality. And it includes this whole secret space program thing, and it includes the idea of ascension. Now, I'm kind of in flames here because 2012 had come and gone. Nothing seems to have happened. But you remember, Corey, that there was a weird event in December 2014, right around the time that you and I started talking. And I'd heard about this from other insiders. And what I'd heard was that they tried to shoot something just outside Earth with a big, big particle beam weapon. There was just some argument over, had it come out of Australia, or where was it shot? You remember this part, right? So why don't you tell everybody what happened there?
Yeah, I was told that either the targeting system for this weapon was in Australia and the weapon itself was in South Africa, or vice versa. That it was a 2-part weapon. It was a targeting system and the actual weapons platform. That it had targeted a sphere that they had detected outside the atmosphere, and that they were going to destroy it because they had been sending ships out to where they knew they were, trying to hail whoever was supposedly in these spheres. They got no response.
And when you say sphere, how big are we talking? Is it like a golf ball?
No. The smallest ones were the size of the moon. The largest ones were the size of Jupiter.
And they were somehow cloaked. It's not like these are all visible to people on Earth.
Right. They were out of phase more than anything. And so they trained their weapon on one of these spheres and fired. And the sphere, using an Aikido principle, just redirected the energy right back down. And there were, I'm told, reptilians present, there were non-terrestrials present, and what we're calling deep state or cabal operatives present at this location that was destroyed.
Right. And again, when you start hearing about reptilians and things like this is another example of something that I'd been hearing about, that there are certain types of extraterrestrials that have a reptilian physiology. The descriptions between insiders who've never spoken to each other, and I never put the stuff online, was remarkably consistent. I mean, incredible, way beyond the likelihood of chance. And enough people are telling you the same things. Either you're the victim of the most well-financed and vast disinformation campaign ever mounted on Earth, or Occam's razor, slice it off. They're actually telling you the truth. And so that was my conclusion, is that these guys are telling me the truth. So they not only redirected the beam back to the Earth. Oh, here's the same fly that my wife was so upset about the other day. Now
Roger almost ate it.
Now we're going to be doing this for the next hour. So, not only did this beam redirect back to the base that shot it, but a far more dramatic and massive effect also took place. And could you remind everybody, in case they hadn't heard all the details of the story, what that was?
Yes. At that point, a barrier went up around the Earth and the solar system that prevented non-terrestrials from a wide range of densities from being able to come or go from our solar system.
So essentially, we ended up under some kind of quarantine. Mm-hmm. And this event, again, took place after you and I started talking, but right within, so December 2014, you and I started talking, end of October 2014, right as we're really getting into the thick of it, that's when this thing happens. And there's this barrier that goes up around our solar system and the Earth. Now, it was at the very end of February that someone contacts you and says that they want you back into the world that you had come from before. So could you describe for us how that initial contact took place and what was the request that was given? Because you hadn't been contacted since the 90s for this portal stuff.
Right. You're talking about when I started meeting Gonzalez.
Yep.
Right. Well, first I had met him before we were even introduced. He came to my house before I came out with all this information when I was going through all of the depression after I had the needle stuck in my eye, when I had a detached retina. And all of these 20 and back experiences came back, and it was overwhelming. He showed up with the Mayans at my house, and they helped mitigate the problems with the memories returning. A little bit later on, Tier prepared me, told me that I was going to speak on their behalf, and that I was going to be contacted by people from my old life, I guess you could say. Right. And I was not at all excited about it.
So for translating, for those who haven't heard this narrative before, when he talks about 20 and back, he's describing a very strange experience where you're taken into space, you work for 20 years, because they have time travel, they revert you back to the time you left, whatever that date was, and then they put you through this machine, takes about a week, and they age regress you back to the age you were when you left. And then they splice you in and wipe out the memory of those 20 years, and it actually works pretty well.
And where that technology came from, I'm told, are the Nordics. That Nordics on other planets, when they're trying to liberate them, they will come in and use this 20 and back type program. They'll bring it in, and it allows them to use assets on that planet to fight for its sovereignty without breaking cosmic law. They're pulling these people out off the Earth or off of whatever planet. They're serving in these programs, and then they're removing all memory of it and putting them back in time.
And you had said in your 20 and backs that you might have people who had come from the era of like the 1950s working besides people who came from the 1980s.
Right. They wouldn't tell you that, but you know, people from different eras, they have very obvious giveaways, how they move, how they just, their demeanor, and how, you know, obviously how they talk. And I saw this quite a bit. And later on, after I'd been in the program for a while, I asked, are these people coming, I asked one of the scientists, are these people coming from different time periods? And they said on rare occasion that these people were being pulled.
So let's now go to the moment that you actually get brought up there again and you're at what you call the LOC or Lunar Operations Command in a conference room, maybe not a whole lot different than this.
Not a whole lot different at all. Yeah.
And you're up there on stage, Gonzalez has brought you in, and everybody in the audience starts heckling you, thinking that you're some fool.
Well, just these people up front.
Oh, okay.
Heckling.
Yeah, this dude looks pretty shady right here. I don't know about him.
Yeah, basically Gonzalez walked me through a door, walked me right up to the front of the room, and he said, stand right here. And it was like kind of off-centered. And I just kind of stood there and was trying not to make eye contact. And I was wearing a NASA hat, which was a big mistake. And that's when the people started, you know, since when is NASA on the moon? You know, remove that cover. And I took it off. I also had a painting on my hand of a dinosaur that my daughter painted on. She wanted to do face paint, but I knew I was going to have this meeting, so I couldn't do it. And they were asking why I had a reptilian on my hand.
So all of a sudden, what you've reported is that all of a sudden, like you imagine everybody's kind of relaxed and laughing right now, and then all of a sudden everybody goes like this in the audience.
Yeah. Not nearly that dramatic, but there was...
Well,
yeah.
I like to be dramatic.
You do, yeah. But yes, everyone straightened up and leaned back, and their eyes got really big. And I looked behind me, and Tier Air was there, and the being I'd never seen before, these golden triangle-headed beings.
Right. The wavy arms.
Very strange looking, yeah.
So at this point, from what you've described, and most of the people know the story, but there's a reason why I'm bringing this up again. The beings that had already been talking to you, you said in your dreams, they'd approached you before, you had a dog turn into this being in one of your dreams, and they had prepared you that you were going to have this meeting. For some reason, which is exactly what's like in the Law of One, by universal law, they could not talk to these people directly. They had to use you as an instrument, as an interface, telepathically.
Yes, I mean, they told me, repeat what we tell you exactly as we tell you. So,
which is exactly what happened in the dream I had with the being whispering to me, saying, I can't do it electromagnetically, I'm going to talk to you, and then you put it onto the tape.
Yeah, it just seemed like a waste of time. You know, I'm standing there, they're standing there, and they could have easily communicated with these people, but they didn't.
Now, how many of these spheres were in our solar system, roughly, at the time that this meeting was taking place?
There were many, hundreds. They had been seeing them pouring in through the sun, portaling in through the sun and coming in from outside of the solar system. They had been seeing them come in since, I think, around 2011. And at the end of 2012, that failure date, supposedly, they came in mass. And I think that's the big thing that occurred in 2012. We just didn't necessarily get to see it.
But also, everybody in the space program, even back when you were in it, and all my insiders also were telling me this, everybody's expecting at some point that the sun is going to give off an enormously bright flash of light, much brighter than usual. Like a full halo coronal mass ejection kind of thing.
Yes, and also, more so during that time period, those people were thinking that it was the return of the Anunnaki, but they couldn't understand why the reptilians were so nervous.
Right.
You know, so the military-industrial complex was thinking that it was the return of their gods, and they were sadly disappointed.
But, and remember now, in case you guys haven't heard this already, way back in the late 1990s, 98, 99, there was this guy with a website, cyberspaceorbit.com. His name was Kent Stedman, and he was reporting multiple times of the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory Satellite, or SOHO, seeing these gigantic planet-sized objects coming in that he called sun cruisers. And a lot of people got confused back then because there would be a line across the dot, but that's because it was so bright that it blew out the CCD sensors in the camera and created a pixel fault that made that line horizontally. So what you're actually seeing is a big planet-sized dot. They're literally the size of the other planets. And they would come in through the sun, and again, it's sad that we didn't have YouTube back then. We didn't have anywhere near the number of people watching this, because I was into it back in the late 90s, and this stuff was happening all the time. And many times when these things would come in, NASA would all of a sudden, oops, SOHO has had a malfunction. And it doesn't work, and oops, the camera shut off. And oops, now we're going to have to reboot it. But there were enough times that they caught the thing on film. But I only saw maybe, 10, 20 examples of these planet-sized objects. But what you're saying is that there were hundreds of them in our solar system.
They couldn't figure out what was going on at first. They were pouring in, the Earth is in a very small area on this side of the sun, and it's traveling around. These spheres were everywhere. And they were positioning themselves from the sun out, with the different size spheres were positioning themselves in a way that like they were some sort of a resonance device. Waves were coming from the sun and from the outer cosmos, and as they were coming in, these spheres were vibrating and baffling the energy that was coming in because they were protecting us and the planet. We weren't ready for it yet.
So a lot of these insiders that I had, their information was really no more recent than the 80s, because they'd been out for a while, and then they come to me after 20 years of thinking about it, or more. And back then, they were thinking that the sun was going to do its flash at the end of 2012. And they were seeing things like these two timelines that fluttered together into one at the end of 2012. They have the guys going through Montauk and the portals, and then they hit this wall and they turn into particles. And then after 2012, they have this God consciousness experience. And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying it sure looks like the solar flash is going to happen at the Mayan calendar end date. So by this point, it's come and gone. 2012's come and gone. And did these guys in the audience want to ask these beings through you, what the heck happened with 2012? Why didn't the sun do its flash?
They asked a number of questions. Some of them were about actually the law of one. Some were asking about a soul trap when we die. Right. And some of them were asking highly technical questions. I did not even know what I was saying back when I was responding. So, I had no base of reference to be able to tell you what I was talking about. I had no idea.
But there was a point made, and this is already in the episode, so I'm not leading him, okay, for those keyboard warriors again who are going to try to think that they're amazing because they found a mistake or something. But one of the things that you did say, and I just want to get to this because we're going to bring Emery up in just a minute here, is that they were asked about what were the spheres really doing. And so just to really cut to the chase, it appeared, right, that the spheres were holding off this solar flash.
Right. They were attenuating the energy. Okay. Man, the way I describe it compared to the way they describe it to me, there's a major gulf. I've described the electromagnetic filaments that, occur. So they break it down.
For portals, yeah.
For portals. So I'm sorry, I got lost in the...
This is what happens when you're 113 years old.
Yes.
Give him a big round of applause, everybody. what was the bottom line of the spheres that they were holding off the solar flash until we were all ready as a planet?
Right. There was some sort of electromagnetic attenuation that was occurring that was preventing our star from completing an electromagnetic arc connection to the other stars as this energy was passing through them, through the cosmic web. It prevented that from occurring. Yes.
All right. So another thing that's very bizarre here is that some kind of cosmic Aikido principle, as you said, they shot this sphere. The sphere shoots back, blows up this base, which might have been Pine Gap in Australia or something like that. There's a few Area 51s in Australia I've heard about, way out in the desert. And then this barrier goes up around the solar system, and ETs can't come in, and ETs can't go out. Now, if the barrier is there, and the solar flash is going to happen, and there's some really nasty reptilian ETs in our solar system, what's going to happen to them if they can't get out of here when the solar flash goes off?
They're going to be caught up in the effects of these energies. And I have to say that the synchronicity, you talking about people trying to travel past 2012 in these portals and them running into this cosmic consciousness. I don't know if you heard last night, I was talking with Roger. The Anshar recently told me they were describing the energies that are coming through our solar system right now and how incredibly powerful they are. They refer to them as the cosmic consciousness. They said it was the logos of the galaxy, right. Basically a Christ consciousness that was coming back to cause a great revealing within us and within the planet to where we all judge ourselves.
Right, and I'm going to go through this tomorrow in the workshop, the prophecies of ascension, the science of ascension, interplanetary climate change, all the signs that our solar system is like a capacitor building up energy. And similar to electromagnetics, if you build up enough charge, you're going to get a static shock, right? If you scuff your feet on a wool carpet and then you touch the doorknob, it's because you've built up all this energy charge in your body and it has to discharge. So it appears, right, like the sun is going to have some kind of discharge like this.
Correct, yeah.
So the effect on these negative ETs, apparently they have built a major headquarters in our solar system, correct?
Correct. And they're afraid, these beings are afraid of being exposed to this cosmic consciousness.
So they would have gotten out of here if they could have.
Right. And the reptilians, even I was brought to a meeting to where they were willing to hand over all of their underlings to betray everyone to be given safe passage outside of the solar system because they did not want to be here when this judgment or whatever happens. Because they're going to be forced to judge themselves as well.
Right. So this is very exciting because it lends so much more depth and credibility to the ancient prophecies that we encountered that I'm going to be going through tomorrow. There's so much there that crosses over with Corey now being like the modern Enoch. If you look at the book of Enoch, Enoch was brought up into the heavens and became a messenger where the bad ETs on earth were asking to be saved by the good ETs called the Elohim, and they were rejected. And this is what led to the Atlantean flood. And because the people here on earth we call the Cabal or the Illuminati are the descendants of those ETs that lost out on that deal and had the flood, they think that our God, the Abrahamic God in the Western traditions, is evil because he voted for the flood, voted to kill these people off. So there's this ongoing 12,000-year-old grudge that they have that still hasn't been properly resolved. So to really kind of hit the nail on the head here, obviously, when I started to talk to you and all the other insiders, everybody who was real had things that were precisely described in the Law of One material, including materials of technology, bases on the moon, all this kind of stuff. Did anybody in this crowd ask about the Law of One?
Yes. Yes, they asked if Tier Air was the Ra from the Law of One.
And what was his answer?
I am Ra Tier Air.
And the beginning of every statement they make in the Law of One starts with the phrase, I am Ra. And it was pronounced Ra by her, Carla, when she was speaking, but Ra is Ra. right?
Right. They say Rao.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's so weird is that right away I knew, okay, avian, Horus, right? Egyptian. This is the law of one contact coming back.
But I wasn't buying it.
I know. But then in the kitchen, remember this part, in the kitchen I asked, is Corey in contact with Ra of the law of one? And I heard 3 words, go outside now. That's all I got. And I asked again, I hear, go outside now. Like this. This is what it sounded like. 3 times I asked the same thing, and they did not give me anything else. So I say, okay, fine, I'll go outside. I walk outside, and there is this gigantic rainbow over the valley of Los Angeles. And so this is the funny thing, is they don't really answer the question. But yet, I knew the rainbow was the answer. And in the law of one, they explain how they have to preserve free will. They can't really tell you, but they can make a strong hint. So again, it's like that answer was like a strong hint. So now I have, and you guys know this, of course, the law of one is exceedingly complex. 106 question and answer sessions where he jumps all around. It's very, very complex material. To really dig deep into the meat of this thing, you actually have to read the law of one, understand the philosophy, that they're talking about ascension, they're talking about these events coming to play. And the beings that you start to talk to seem to have this encyclopedic knowledge of the law of one. It was crazy, like they had the book there and they're just flipping through it. So now, guys, without further ado, I want to bring Emery Smith up to the stage. Let's get him out here.